Hey everybody, my guest today is Stacey Yudin. Stacey is the CEO of NEP Services. We're going to talk about what that means in terms of what she does. We're going to get into Stacey's a little bit about her background, her philosophy. I've had a chance to catch up with Stacey before we kicked off, and I can't wait for this conversation. It's going to be awesome. Stacey, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, excellent. Stacey, where are you in the world today?
Oh, I'm videoing in from beautiful Laguna Beach, California. The weather is gorgeous. The ocean is sparkling on the coast. No complaints.
You're talking, yeah, I think I mentioned I'm in New York. It's warm here today, but it's getting cold, and Laguna Beach sounds very nice right now.
Yeah, the water is incredibly cold, but for all of those health nuts out there, I do go to hot yoga and then I try to jump in the freezing cold ocean as my cold dip, which
There you
I
go.
recommend to anyone who's brave enough to try.
I like a good cold plunge as well. That's great. I'm going to say this conversation's starting out very California. Like I go to hot yoga and then I do my cold plunge in the ocean and then I do some podcasts. It's so good. I love it. That's
It's
awesome.
part of a balanced work life. Gotta
Absolutely.
have it. It's a marathon, not a race. I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah. Well, Stacey, let's actually kick the conversation off of that. You, like I mentioned, you are the CEO of a software company. You're a female in tech leadership. It's amazing in and of itself. There's obviously, that is not an equal playing field, even still today. So let's actually kick off by talking about how you take care of yourself to do that really important job so that you can take care of, you said you're married and you have a team of folks that you work for, and then you service them through the software and services that you provide. So how do you think about taking care of yourself so that you can be your best self and do your job?
Yeah, well, I mean, no one's perfect at that. And obviously being in the executive leadership role as myself and my colleagues know, there's times of the year where taking care of yourself is just not possible. It's
Yeah.
put on the back burner. So my philosophy is for the entire team, and I do try to remind the team, we're going to have the busy months. We're going to have the, excuse my French, kick-ass quarters
Yeah.
where it's pedal to the metal. We need to focus. We have deadlines. We have deliverables. And there'll be time in the season where we can get back to balance and focus. So, I encourage everyone in our company, we're fully remote work, which I think, despite some collaborative drawbacks, offers an opportunity for people to not spend their time in the car 30 minutes getting to my office to meet with me face to face. Instead, they can spend 30 minutes taking a walk outside, taking a break. I encourage people on sort of you know, less important internal phone calls, that if they need to take those calls while walking around the block, using their headset. Technology has enabled us to work more efficiently and also to work remotely. So as long as it's, they're producing and we can measure ROI, which our team is incredible at NEP. We've done a lot with a very small team, a very nimble environment. I think remote work allows you to take opportunities for yourself and rebalance. Like I said, there's going to be times where it's pedal to the metal and
Yeah.
self-care is not a priority. It's the last thing on the list. But remote work's allowed us to, get up a little earlier, carve out that extra half an hour, go jump in the ocean and then race back for your podcast.
Yeah, there you go. To come back for the podcast. Stacey, you said something I really appreciate, and it's that you and the team, you acknowledge that it's not always going to be balanced. I think that's the truth, yet I think it doesn't get said all the time. Like, oh, we've got our, work-life balance a little, in my opinion, is played out, but this idea that you're going to get it is, especially when you're running a company that's a software company, you have sales, you're doing software sprints, you have important clients, you're servicing people around the globe. There are going to be times when it's not going to feel balanced. And that's actually normal and okay. So I really appreciate that you say that. And then you acknowledge that with your team and ask them for the same.
Yeah, and I think the other sort of misnomer that is portrayed ineffectively across social media is the fact that things need to be perfect, and you're going to launch with a perfect product, and your clients are always going to be incredibly happy. And of course, my clients are always incredibly happy.
Oh,
No,
every
I'm
time,
just kidding.
100%.
But their expectation of perfection in all of us is something that I've had to work past as sort of a perfectionist, a self-applied perfectionist,
Yeah.
letting things go, getting to development, getting to MVP, knowing you have bugs, pushing through that fear of failure. even though, it's really not about failure. The new platform is going to be incredible, but you've got to get out there to get real advice, real feedback from the real world. Your team is a
Yeah.
closed loop, a closed circle of conversation. And until you really push it out there, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So the work-life balance, I think, also allows you to take a moment, allows you to step out of the forest, maybe see the forest through the trees a little bit, gain a little emotional perspective that I think adds value when you get back into those sprints, those tough times. And yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
You're not going to
Yeah.
win if you're not bleeding. And I think that people need to understand that, as well as it is supposed to be difficult.
Yeah.
If it's not difficult, you're probably not trying hard enough.
Yeah. So how do you think about the perfectionist? That's an interesting thing as well. Folks that I know that are perfectionists, they have trouble letting go of that, because that is in a way to protect and protect and control. As somebody who's leading a company with a bunch of other people who don't do it exactly like you, or nor should they, and
Mhm.
in a space, there is no such thing as perfection. Show me a perfect piece of software and I'll say you're lying to me. What have you done to manage or grow that part of your skill set and your personality to become a more effective leader?
It took me a minute. Over the last 12 years, we've been building strategic communication software for labor unions, nonprofits. Our mission and goal has been to centralize this fractured data and tool set. So nonprofits are using like 15 tools to run. Labor
Yeah.
unions are running, 3 different programs. They've got data everywhere. We have data security issues potentially. So the idea that all of that would come together in a perfect little scenario is unrealistic. So
Yeah.
for me, what's worked best is to embrace the feedback from customers, to embrace the upset customer, sort of embrace that as a positive.
Mm.
So for me, I'm using that as they're helping me grow my IP. They're helping me broaden my perspective. They're giving me insight and valuable information that although at first it might come across as negative, it's really only negative if I choose to view it that way.
Yeah.
So letting go, perfectionism has a lot to do with, I think, the feedback that you get that it's not perfect. So
Mm.
by letting that expectation go and getting really excited, motivated, hyped up about all of the feedback that you're gonna get. And by the way, the feedback that we've been getting, majority is 90% plus is positive.
Sure. Yeah.
It's very rarely, I think, we take the one little negative feedback and we sort of, exaggerate that in the bigger
Yeah.
scale. But letting go and embracing all feedback of every kind, the good, bad, and the ugly, the people that leave comments on, when I do a podcast and say whatever it might be, hey, it's great feedback. I can learn from it. We can move on.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the perfectionism, helping us grow more strategically, utilizing different perspectives is not just internal to my team,
Yeah.
but I've included my clients in that perspective. And that's helped me kind of roll back those unexpected or larger than life expectations that are not realistic.
Yeah. The icebreaker question or networking question, what's something you wish you could tell your younger self? One of my favorite ones is, you're not going to be for everybody. There's nobody on the planet that's going to go, everybody adores that person. And that includes the businesses we run, the technology we build. It's just not. And I'm laughing because I came from the software industry. I'm just laughing. You get the one-off. It's like, well, the software doesn't do this, and it's the only person who'd ask it, and that feedback still stings,
Mm-hmm.
because as good people who want to do good things in the world, we want to support everybody. And then you look and you go, that just doesn't make sense from a business perspective.
Exactly. So, you can get lost and go down a wormhole, micro adjusting features, right? Really spending thousands of hours of business analyst time and feature experts and developers just to go down a rabbit hole for less than 2% of your client base, when really,
Yeah.
it's great feedback to take into consideration across the whole market. You probably need to do some research to see if that applies more broadly and people aren't just elevating that particular perspective. But more likely than not, it is not the path that your software should be on, and you need to, sort of take that with a grain of salt,
Yeah.
which is an old saying, but more applicable to software, I think, and even running a company than anything, because you're going to go ahead and change your methodology and your approach for every little piece of feedback that doesn't match your sort of perfectionist ideal, you're going to end up nowhere, right? So
Yeah.
that's been the biggest changing journey for us, is really, really honing in on where we are, where our strengths are, double downing on those strengths, and being really excited to embrace all different levels of feedback.
Yeah, you're going to end up in a product roadmap hell where you're never actually doing the things that you're strategically set out to do, and you're just filling in feature requests.
We've never been there.
Yeah, no, never. Nobody's ever done that to get the revenue. No, I worked for a Series A startup where that's all we did for about 2 years. Like, what does that one person want who's willing to pay us?
I think the other thing is that even the largest, most well-known companies in the world, they're not that much different culture-wise from most companies, right? So they have their product roadmap disagreements. They've got teams that are arguing and debating, where to go with the software, what's a better fit, what's a better analysis, what's a better, marketplace. And so I don't think anything that we've experienced in our last 8 years of double-digit growth is sort of out of the norm for what the industry is.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacey. I'd like to move next. I want to talk about NEP specifically. You all serve to me, it's a really interesting place in the market and what you do. And I want to talk first about why, or the genesis of why you're here today and what had you and the team create it. And then what's the big issue that's in this space, and talk about the space. And then we'll wrap the conversation. As a leader, I want to get your perspective on hiring for culture and some of the other things that you think about as you go, hey, like 3 years from now or 5 years from now, we're going to need to double the team. Who do we hire for? Because technical expertise is becoming, to me, is cheaper and cheaper and easier to find between technology and people. And it's all about, do you get along and do you work well? So first of all, let's talk about the space. I'll just give a little high level, then go deep with this here. So NEP Services, you support specifically nonprofits, unions around, and you mentioned around communications and bringing a membership or groups of people that are either paying or in nonprofit space, donors, together and allowing you to communicate more effectively and do more of that. That's an interesting space. As somebody who we are involved in a nonprofit, I am not in a union. That is not a space that I would generally think about that much. So I'm really curious, like, that, a little bit about the challenges in that space, and then why do you support that space?
Yeah. So, I believe that you can make a profit and do good in this world. I might be one of few people that do, but I tend to lean to the optimism side of the table and say, I think actually most people really want to add value in their current job, which, working for a private company, and, they're volunteering at a nonprofit, they're giving back to they're working at a local food bank. So I believe in the collective power of that as a mechanism to enhance our communities, thinking about how we can work together more efficiently. It takes a village, it takes a tribe. And our company does that in a technology directive. So our big top level goal is to take nonprofits and make them more efficient. Hopefully they run their operational efficiency, 6, 10x's, so that the more of the donor dollar can go back to a cause. And so there's a lot of exciting opportunities. We're looking, and we have some R&D projects using AI inside of our platform. That's going to give our organizations ability to adapt to changing economy, ability to communicate strategically. And in particular for our labor unions, labor unions are a big representation of the middle class, the working American, working hard every day for good and fair pay. And I personally think that their voice needs to be fair and balanced among private interest and Fortune 500. That is how we achieve sort of a balanced economy. That is the give and take between in a culture that only serves the elite and an economy that also represents a fair and balanced working man, that everyone can work a hard day and earn a fair pay. And there has to be push and pull in that. And so our labor union communication strategically allows them to organize a very fractured set of data and streamline their ability to manage communication software with an all-in-one email, text, social integration, chat, document storage. It's an ERP, basically, to help these organizations be more efficient. And the goal is that, they can elevate their concerns, and They're not left to, sort of compete with Fortune 500 companies and 100 companies and lobbyists and legislators who have budgets that are, 16 times there. So we're helping them
Yeah.
elevate that conversation and have a seat at the table.
Mm. I always like to ask people in the technology space, what are they doing if they're not using something like the products you provide? What are they doing instead?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had this discussion yesterday, and they're using a variety of tools that are one-offs, and then
Yep.
there's a big chunk of the market that's really unrealized. So we
Sure.
see our market as growing over the next 10 years, and I don't think we're the only ones. But I think the opportunity for efficiency and the way that we're structuring communication between organizations is very unique. And I think that'll bring a lot of value. That'll streamline a lot of administrative time where those individuals can be doing the important work of working with members, helping members get access to healthcare, helping them find in-network care options versus utilizing out-of-network care options. Like there's a lot of ways to save money and save time and effort, reduce bureaucracy. And that trickles down to every single member in that organization, that labor union, that nonprofit, and that trickles down to supporting community. They
Yeah.
have a bigger budget to give back. So
Sure.
these are all areas that we can improve upon, and that's our mission.
Yeah, I'm gonna brag on you for a little bit. You didn't talk about who you work with, and I'm not gonna name specific chapters, but you do business with some of the biggest unions here in the United States, at least. That's so if you were to Google the top 10 unions by membership, or like you're doing business with a lot of them. I'll leave it at that. So we're talking about massive impact and massive scale. We're talking a large population supported. This isn't a niche thing. And I know you work with a lot of fairly large nonprofits as well. And I knew you weren't going to brag on yourself, Stacey, so I was going to do that for you.
You're kind. You're kind. Yeah, we're very proud to work a lot in the first responder space. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
believe in caring for our first responders. We believe in giving police and firefighter officers an opportunity to elevate concerns that they see on the street. And their unions are able to do that, to have a discussion and a debate about policy issues and have people from all sides of the table be able to elevate their concerns. I mean, that
Yeah.
is what this country was founded on, was robust discussion, disagreement, and they're a part of that important feedback loop. And all of that helps keep our community safer. In addition, just general labor unions as well, and nonprofits. I mean, some of the direct mail and digital fundraising tools that we've innovated probably have saved hundreds of millions of dollars for nonprofits in fulfillment and processing.
It's amazing.
Our new helpahero.com crowdfunding tool is a unique tool in the sense that all of the data of the donors that comes through is never resold or shared with any third-party marketing. That's just sort of a data security piece that I'm very, very critical on. When you get those spam and telemarketing calls,
Yep.
That's because someone resold that data or shared that data. And I don't believe that that's the way of the future. And I believe in personal privacy. So that data is kept, never reshared, and each nonprofit can holistically use that for whatever campaign they need. You're not inundated with a bunch of garbage calls.
You obviously, Stacey, they can't see us, but I'm smiling because I'm, with this, we're recording this a week and a half after the the elections here in the United States. And I got emails from various Senate races from states that I have nothing to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously because my data somehow got to them. And it's actually a waste of resources. Like I live in New York. I can't vote in the state of Ohio or wherever it is. And they weren't even asking for money. They were like asking for me to go out and vote for them. I said, this is a waste of resources and a waste of my time. Yeah, I'm sure you probably have the horror stories of what things can happen. We won't even go into the horrors of all these things. I want to ask you next, why this space? Like, what's the origin story?
Well, I think my origin story is going to be very similar to my team's origin story. Everyone that works with us is incredibly passionate about some part of our business or some segment of our customer base for some reason. So I'll give you a little bit of mine, but just understand that we really hire and we look for culture and fit and personality in addition to skill. But I believe working well on teams and collaboration is a 10x to maybe having a technical skill. So to all those young people out there,
Yeah.
who think that, they have to have all the advanced degrees. Maybe it also means they need a little bit of experience, a little bit of getting their hands dirty, more time maturing, working with a team. So, growing up, and I think, again, this is very similar to my coworkers, I was really involved in a lot of community causes. I enjoyed working at a local soup kitchen, Someone Cares Soup Kitchen in Costa Mesa, which is an incredible organization. We had a lot of challenges in my family growing up, so it gave me perspective.
Mhm.
It could always be worse.
Yeah.
So I was very blessed to be brought up in a culture where I really it's not all about me, and what I want for my birthday. And I think there's a little bit of that issue now with parents who raise kids.
Yep.
It's a broader perspective, and I was raised giving back, investing in the community. So working with NEP and helping nonprofits be more efficient, and ultimately that was the perfect fusion of business and giving back and making the world a better place. Hopefully someday I'll be a philanthropist and have the opportunity to work with some of the
Yeah.
greatest philanthropists around the world,
Yeah.
Melinda Gates, and so I think this is my opportunity to make a little impact with the nonprofits that we serve,
Yeah.
either by saving them funds, making them more efficient, helping them raise more funds to create a bigger impact in their local community or their members. And that was my journey. And so this, for me, every day I wake up blessed to work with an incredible set of coworkers who share my passion, who constantly educate me on what's happening on the ground and how we
Mhm.
can do better and changing conditions for nonprofits. Just like businesses and Fortune 500s, nonprofits are affected by the economy.
Sure.
Local, individuals who are part of unions are affected by, inflation and shrinkflation. So there's a lot that we can do to help each one of these organizations and pivot as much as a Fortune 500 business to add value and improve the condition of, our neighbor. Because what
Yeah.
we're really talking about is people they serve are probably our neighbor, the guy down the block.
Totally.
These are not individuals that don't have a face. These are people
No,
that already live in your community.
absolutely. Yeah. I'm friends with a variety of firefighters and police, and yeah, amazing people. And they living here on the East Coast, that this is like ground zero for a union, just based on the history, at least for like emergency services and such. And great people. They were doing work that at the end of the day I was laughing, the kind of business I run and the kind of business you run, nobody's dying and nothing's on fire every day. These people are literally dealing with those things. And you probably said this to your team sometime. You're like, is everybody still alive and is anything on fire? If the answer is yes and no, we're going to be fine. These people literally are dealing with that every day.
No, I mean, absolutely. The stories that we hear, I mean, again, our team, we have, I don't know, culturally, we have like 87% retention with our team. I think it's because it also gives us a little perspective.
Yeah.
We think what we're doing is the most important thing in the world, and we are very proud of it. We are really client centric and focused on how we build features and have only improved that. When it comes down to it, what we do is nothing compared to the sacrifices of labor unions and steel workers, that are out there hanging from bridges, making sure that you and I can get to work on time,
Yeah.
right? They're building up the infrastructure that makes the economy run. And we sort of forget that. We take that for advantage. I can walk down the street and not be mugged. Well, there's a
Yeah.
reason.
There's a reason. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
for anyone who's traveled and been to sort of other countries that don't have as great of a police and fire and public safety infrastructure as we do in the United States. I mean, there are risks when you go to the grocery store. There are risks,
Absolutely.
when your kid walks home from school, and for the most part, there are areas where we can make significant improvements across the country, and we can always do better. But I'm proud to work with all the first responders, and we sort of forget that. We forget
Yeah.
that literally things are on fire and they're being shot at.
Yeah. Literally, literally things are on fire. What I want to talk a little bit about leadership. And I interview a lot of leaders in this show. I always like to get the unique perspectives so we all can learn from you, and everybody's a little bit different. So how do you look at running a company and running the team? And I always like to start with, what do you spend most of your time doing? Because I get that I ask
Mhm.
that question and people give me different answers. So what do you spend your time doing, and what do you spend most of your time thinking about?
It's a good question. I'll answer it in two ways.
Yes.
Um, What I spend most of my time doing, and this comes from when you build a product, you get so ingrained and obsessed with the product. And it takes a while for you to kind of pull back and see the wider
Mm,
playing field. So I still spend a lot of time in with the product. I spend a lot of time with customers. I think in our growth cycle right now is we're, doubling every year,
mhm.
expanding. We're in 34 states in
Amazing.
probably 16 different sectors of labor unions and organizations and nonprofits, meeting with customers on the ground, going to them, having face-to-face meetings. It's not just always a Zoom world. I find those opportunities incredibly valuable. I also find the opportunity a lot of times when I do that to meet with other third party providers.
Mm,
And they also broaden my perspective. And so a lot of my time right now is spent broadening my perspective about product, about client fit, about our market. The more the more expertise I can learn along the way, I think the better I can lead the team. And then really the other side of it is I think as a leader, I try to get out of the way. One of my goals for hiring is to hire people that are smarter than me, that are savvier than me, that have more experience than I do. I do not want to know it all. That sounds awful. I,
it does.
yeah, I really want to surround myself with people that are better than me. And I feel like over the last 5 and 6 years, we've really broadened our hiring strategy to do that and a very much focus on recruitment. And I think the other sort of fallacy in business, and I'm probably going to rub people the wrong way with this, but I
Please do.
hire, right? I like teams that sort of create conflict.
Yeah.
I like putting a team together with different perspectives. Now, I don't need a drag out brawl, but what I do need is I need a team that represents different perspectives. So I'll typically approach a problem from a very business angle, more of a business analyst when we're discussing a feature potentially or a client issue. I have people on the team where they are going to live and die by representing the client and what's best for the client. And I have
Sure.
other team members that will live and die in the other team. And they're conversations that you have to have, and it's okay to have a difficult conversation. It's okay to disagree. It's okay to hang up the phone call and be like, I don't know where we got on that. We did not resolve that. But
Mm,
we got a lot of different perspectives on the table, and that provides us an opportunity to really let that resonate, circle back to that feature. And so you spend a lot of time thinking about those different perspectives. And even if you don't initially agree with them, I find that sort of puts together the pieces in your head when you're meeting with other clients, and things fit differently together when you
yeah.
allow yourself to have these very uncomfortable conversations. And so one of the strategies for hiring is that I don't want to live in my own echo chamber.
Yeah.
And so over the last 5 and 6 years, we've hired and we've grown our culture. Disagreement is hard, but we need to embrace it.
How do you know what to delegate in terms of tough decisions and conversations? And how do you know when you need to make the final call? Because most leaders that I work with and we talk about, that's arguably the hardest part about leadership is it does fall on you at the end of the day, which is why you're doing what you're doing. But how do you know, is it like, I'll give you some different examples. Is it a certain dollar amount? Is it two people just can't agree and you need to play almost like the mediator or be like I'm going to call you objective third party, be the third party. Some leaders are like, make all the decisions until I tell you I want to make a decision. And others are like, bring everything to me. And then it sounds like you're most likely somewhere in the middle, like most people are. How do you think about that? And how do you know when, because there's a lot of value in delegating big decisions to your team to have them feel empowered so that you're not always stepping over them or having to be the final say. So I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I think as a company, to your point, we've evolved from a space where we had a very sort of top to bottom, we give an order, we say we want to do this, and people march along.
Yeah.
And NEP as a company, especially again from our hiring strategy of hiring experts, we've evolved to a place where teams run pretty independently.
Nice.
And I really do love that. I do not want to micromanage. I think people typically know where I stand on an issue. So there's this overwhelming, like, we know Stacey's not going to like it, but they know that they can reason with me and they can win and they can present their case and their set of evidence. And I want to have that difficult discussion. I want to hear their pushback to an issue. So
Mm.
I think that's where I land. And as a leader, I try as hard as possible not to do it myself and to delegate those decisions where I don't even need to make them. We are at a point in our company where we have independent divisions and support staff that make their own independent decisions. They look at the data. We have our own internal KPIs
Sure.
that we audit, that we measure. We do a great job, especially on our fundraising side and our digital advocacy political outreach team, of measuring our successes, creating our own internal postmortems or case studies, and thinking about how we can do better next time. And that a lot of that has been from the leadership of our president, Mark Treglio, who comes from the firefighters, has been from the leaders like our director of operations from Devon, who's been managing our direct mail fundraising for almost 25 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And a lot of our other team members that are real seasoned in their industry.
Yeah.
And they bring that expertise, but they're also not so seasoned that they're unwilling to listen to innovative ideas. So the other component is that the youngest team members are a part of the conversation. And I think that's an enormous improvement in our culture. And over the last 5 years, our products now, you could see the results.
Yeah.
You know, people that are on the ground level have a voice in what we build, how we build it, clients we serve, what we should be focusing on, and more importantly, what we should not be focusing on.
Yeah. It's such a context shift from historically how unions and things like police and fire work, where it's actually your tenure and your experience in the field. You get like, I'm thinking of even like teachers, you get paid for the amount of time, you get additional pay for the amount of time you've done it, not necessarily for the output or the outcome. And so that I'm sure that's been a bit of an adjustment for some of those who've come from these spaces where, you know, you're not going to make detective when you're 25 because you just don't have enough time on the street yet. Really cool, Stacey. I want to talk about two other things to wrap up here. Number one is, and you alluded to this earlier, hiring. Most folks I know will say that hiring, test. Yeah, weird. It just flipped. I'm getting an echo on my side. Strange. Are you hearing the echo
now? My AirPods disconnected somehow, and that whole shift. I mean,
yeah, that's weird. I'm in a strange echo. Test.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go. That's good.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. You're far away again for some reason, but okay.
Cool. Oh, let's try this again.
Test. You're back. Yeah, you're
good.
Back. Great.
Awesome. Yeah, it was weird that your video switched too. You know, software, never perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna mark that clip and I'll get rid of it. Let's see what it was about. I'm gonna
hiring.
Yeah, I'm gonna say hey, a couple other things to wrap up the convo. Let me mark this and 3, 2, 1. Stacey, a couple of things I want to address with you and get your perspective on. Number one, and you've alluded to this, is hiring. And most folks in business that I know will say that this is arguably the hardest thing to do because it's easy to move around. It's a lot of times you're competing on money, etc. So I'd love to talk about how you hire and retain something like an 87% retention rate. Because I would argue that's extremely high in technology. A lot of mercenaries, I call mercenaries, go for the highest dollar, working on the product that most interests them that week. How do you maintain that? And what do you do up front to make sure when that person walks in the door or gets on Zoom for the first time, that they're likely to be part of that 87% who stays with you for a long tenure?
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice, which is, not my advice, but we've tried to follow it, is, hire slowly, fire quickly.
Yeah.
It's not ruthless. It's I think emotionally and sort of intuitively know if someone's a good culture fit, probably within a month, if not sooner. And I think, that's one of the areas that we've done better. Also, our strategy was to expand very targeted regionally by region. We expanded our hiring practices and set up offices on the East Coast, 5 years ago, and in Texas and in Washington, D.C. as well. And then hired to support that, and then really focus on supporting staff, building a team around that individual or that strategy. So making sure they're not on their own island, I think, is a great retention tool. Mm-hmm. And that's harder now than ever with remote work. We still struggle with that. I think being on the ground, and I try to make at least quarterly calls and connections with every employee. Obviously, some of the junior ones that have just joined our team are going to be, the sort of the last ones on my list, not
Sure.
for any reason that I just can't get to everyone anymore.
Sure.
But, I personally think, when I'm hiring, I don't ever post to the highest top level salary purposefully, because
Mm,
if you want to work with us, we're a mission-based, passion-based, growing, startup culture. We don't need the missionaries. We don't need people that are only there for the money, because what we do is so much greater than the dollars that go back in our pockets. Now, as a growing company too, we need to be as competitive as we can with our other for-profit competitors. And so
sure.
we've done a good job, I think, of combining culture with a hiring process that focuses on personality, teamwork, communication skills, and placing them in the right scenario with the right support and on the right team. Like really getting butts in the seats where they should be
Yeah.
is one of the hardest job. And
Yeah.
one of the things that when we see that if your butt is not in the right seat, one of the things we do pretty quickly and well now is say, hey, what are your thoughts about, working on this team? Or,
Yeah.
and I encourage managers to talk to their team and then self-identify through conversation and sort of mentorship of, your skill set over here is really natural. You seem to be a pro of having these very natural conversations with clients opened up to you. You display trust. Have you ever thought about this? So we've had a lot of employees that have shift teams and sort of
Great.
made lateral moves at our company. They've brought it to our attention or we've suggested it. And I think that helps with retention. It helps with, building a culture of legacy as well.
Awesome.
That provides value back to the product as well. So again, I really hire for personality.
Yeah.
I'm not, if we have a long-term play, just like any other company in the
Sure.
software space, but it's going to take grind and hustle, and they have to be willing to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacey. I want to wrap and ask you, if you look back at your time at NEP specifically, what's the toughest lesson that you've had to learn? Or maybe you're
Mm,
still learning.
always still learning.
Yeah, probably still learning most of us.
Well, the toughest lesson, I think this past year, I'm a very proactive, money on the ball, eye on the prize, highly competitive individual naturally. I am come from an athletic background. I want to be the best in everything that I do, and I want to win 100% of the time.
Hmm.
So I think one of the best lessons I've learned, and it's again another kind of sort of cliche, but I've learned more in my significant failures than I have in my wins. And so now I really do embrace when I lose a deal or, it's a better product market fit, but I thought I got it. A channel partnership didn't work out the way that I, intended or anticipated. I learn more in those moments than ever. And they are what they are. And so, as a wise man once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so, I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time thinking about the areas that we could have done better, how we could have pivoted faster. I really utilize a mentorship network that I didn't have previously to help give me outside perspective and insight into my losses. I think as a leader, you've got to figure out what helps you process the negatives as quickly as possible and put that into usable feedback that you can, deploy back to your team. And so
Yeah.
whether that is exercise or whether that is a mentorship, whether that's, someone trusted within your company that you can have these casual but poignant and honest, transparent conversations. I think as a leader, I'm learning how to do that better and better
Yeah.
and really take those losses and redeploy them as wins, as long-term
Mhm.
strategic changes or wins. Ultimately,
Yeah.
if I lose today, I want to be set up to win tomorrow. And then
Yeah.
I think all of our employees are really good at pivoting in that
That's
moment.
great. I'm also extremely competitive, and you didn't say one thing that I find useful sometimes is a good scream into a pillow.
Hence the cold plunges,
And
that
yeah,
is my own
exactly. The cold plunge, you're like,
self-torture.
whoo, yeah, like I'm gonna torture myself in a way that's actually good for my body, even though it's gonna feel painful.
I'm a girl who loves a great meal and some cocktails as well. So
Yeah.
you've got to work in your social time with your friends and family.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a priority when you're growing a company. So
Yeah.
for all those entrepreneurs out there who think they're going to have work-life balance and they've been watching Instagram videos about being your own boss, it is the hardest job in the world, I would say, besides motherhood. I think motherhood and parenting takes the cake. But in the professional world, unless you've got some sweet deal that I don't know about, it's a 24/7, 365 grind. The rewards are great if you can get there, but the stress and the time. So yeah, scream into a pillow, jump into a freezing cold ocean.
Yeah.
Whatever you've got to do boxing, whatever you got to do.
Yeah, Stacey, this is such an ironic thing to say. It looks like you're on your yacht right now, and like it seems like you've got a party. I'm kidding. Yeah, it's like these. I hate those influencer of like work 2 hours a day and do this. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, and sort of, I don't know if it's setting up this younger generation for success by providing them this sort of glorified dream where they could dream to do anything. And that's great. We want innovators. We want more entrepreneurs. We want people thinking outside of the box, disrupting the market. Like I love all that aspect, but sort of the fantasized, idealized version that they can live in Bali, and sort of run their company remote. Like, please message me if you figured out how to do that.
Like I'm going to do that too, but only if it works. Yeah.
No, my whole team will. We all will,
like I just, Bali,
I don't think that's realistic. But I think there's so much value being a part of a company, whatever stage of growth you're in, where you really feel fulfilled, you feel heard when you're building good things to help people, improve or do better, add more value, whatever that is. So it doesn't have to be just in the nonprofit space, but you could still have a great life and still go to Bali on your vacations.
Yeah, exactly. Last, I do have one more question for you, and then just a question about what's next for NEP. But what's the next big thing that you're working on around your own growth as a leader and as a business leader? What's the thing that you have your eye on for whatever, no specific length of time, but that you've identified as like, hey, that's the next thing I really want to focus on or work on for myself?
For myself as a leader is continuing to expand our ability to take feedback from customers. I say this a lot, we're very customer centric. We listen, we ask questions, we're curious. We're I'm almost obsessively curious. So I think continuing that, trying to balance that with growing the company as well and hiring and scaling our company. For as far as what's next is that we've spent the last 4 years sort of doing that internal hard work that people don't love, which is setting your own systems up to scale. That's not the glamorous work, but we've done all that work and we're in a great spot where we can scale effectively and economically viably over the next 5 years, which is great, and really, really improve our marketing so that we have now 3 SaaS platforms.
Yeah.
So, and those IPs all work together and have their own little niche. And so that internal hard work is going to pay off. So that's good. That's sort of the next best thing that I'm thinking of is how do we take all that ingenuity, all that hard work of replatforming, setting everything's up to scale. We have 750,000 users on our Connect Plus platform.
Amazing.
Those are actually member-based organizations.
Yeah.
So being able to scale, over the next 5 years and know that our software is in a spot for all 3 platforms that is, reliable, we can really focus on, sort of the market conditions and feature focused, which is great.
Every visionary CEO's favorite terminology, technical debt. So exciting.
No, I think technical debt is such a great lesson. And there was a gentleman who worked with me, and he really gave me some incredible advice and perspective on technical debt. And I will always be grateful to him for that. And I actually use that to explain that to my customers now, because I think what you don't realize is every dollar you spend going forward from this moment on is a wasted dollar, in the right situation. So sometimes it's better to bite the bullet and re-platform or completely refactor an entire feature than it is to patchwork it. And I think that's where we've outperformed our competitors. As we did the hard work, we invested our profits, we invested in having the most innovative tech stack, and now we're winning on the field. And I think we will continue to win over the next 5 years. Ultimately.
Amazing. Stacey, thank you so much for an awesome conversation. Really appreciate. That I had one of your team members on. We'll release that episode as well. Probably back to back. People get to know you, but just really appreciate the work you're doing. And I think it's likely a space that I'm just going to speak for myself, but I would assert it's probably not a space that a lot of us who aren't in that work actually think much about. And just making those things easier. I do know a little bit about the nonprofit space and know that there's always challenges with keeping your donors engaged and updated. And how do you do that in a way that's, and I'll leave you with this. You know this in the nonprofit space is there's always this eye on, well, you should be using the majority of the money to the mission. But then if you go and do something like, and I'm just using an example from somebody that I know, they had a really nice year-end report pamphlet, not pamphlet, like a booklet. And it was nice and it cost them a little bit of money and they got a lot of flack because it looked too nice. But then when you don't look nice, then they go, well, are you a legitimate nonprofit? So it's like, as you all are helping them to be more efficient with their messaging and streamline that, you can then don't have to like nickel and dime these other things, which is like a no-win situation.
Yeah, let's just talk about that for 1 second because I'm very passionate on that subject.
Yeah.
So, as a donor, we obviously do want our nonprofits to be as efficient as possible with the donor dollars that we raise. But like a business, there are opportunities to buy things in scale, right? To save money in bulk. And so you should be measuring results of that nonprofit and impact over spend.
Yeah.
So you could raise the most amount of dollars, you could be the top leader of your fundraising and, not spend $1 and your rating will be 5 stars. I think that is a complete false narrative.
Yeah.
I am looking to help organizations that raise a good amount of money. You have to invest to raise more. One of the things that we're really proud of is our digital donation software and CRM. Mm-hmm. We have an 86% retention rate for donors. The national average is 45%.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Our nonprofits don't have to send as many prospect texts or emails or mail. That saves them money in the long term. So you got to think about spend for a nonprofit as an investment, right? And you are measuring your results. You can obviously, there's tools out there besides mine that help you do that more efficiently and cohesively. But as a donor, you need to think about impact more than you need to think about sort of that false narrative rating that you see out there.
Yeah.
If they raised $1 million and they spent $999,000 on staff, but the staff is responsible for vaccinating 100 million kids, that means their labor cost is 99% of your donor dollar.
That's right.
It's not what you care about. We care about impact. The impact is that they vaccinated millions of children. And so a lot of times, and especially in an age of technology and AI, sometimes in nonprofits, humans are what make the difference.
Totally.
Hiring a dedicated staff, paying staff for your nonprofit could be the best investment that you make because there's going to be a continuation of services, a greater impact field, better results.
Yeah.
So I really tell people all the time, if you're going to run a nonprofit, run it like you would a Fortune 500 business. Hiring great people, retaining your best staff members, measuring your results and impact. And what you spend in your budget should all be directed to those 3 areas. So, I see this. I see people getting critical with organizations. I think I recently saw one with UNICEF. UNICEF employs people all around the world delivering life-saving medicine. It takes people to do that. It takes infrastructure to do that. To build a clinic is going to take an investment. And so a lot of what we do is reverse narrative on that is how do you tell your story around impact? It just can't be, you made pretty pamphlets. Well, pretty pamphlets tell your story.
Yeah. And attract serious donors.
Attract serious donors because it means you're serious about your business. You're taking your nonprofit seriously. Now, granted, you should negotiate the best price you can with your printers.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the end of the day, impact is what should be measured, not just your 990s and the fact that you spent 80% on overhead and labor. That labor could be driving impact that affected 100 million people. And in the perspective, that's nothing, right?
Yeah.
That's a drop in the well to your impact. So that's my rant for nonprofit leaders.
No, this is probably a whole separate podcast episode. Like this is obviously a super cool topic.
Yeah.
We'll have you back on. We'll talk about this. I've got one of my good friends. He runs a 45 person nonprofit, and he always likes to say, We're a charity that doesn't run like a charity.
Amazing.
That's how he runs the business. He's got a real good analytical business mind, and he does it because he cares.
Yeah, one of the nonprofits I've met in New York, because I know you're based there, Charity Water. Charity Water does a great job. They run it just like a business. And look at the impact. Impact is what measures, right? Results, just like any other company.
Small world. It's my friend is not with Charity Water, but he's also in the clean water space. He does it overseas, but also so they partner with Charity Water.
Amazing. I'd love to do a field trip. I've been wanting to get on the ground, when I can get a little break from NEP and take a vacation, but I'd love to spend some time working overseas at some point. So maybe we can connect on that.
We'll talk offline. I've got a potential opportunity for you. Stacey, it was wonderful to have you on. We'll have you back on and continue the conversation. Again, thanks to you and the team for all the work you're doing, and keep doing the good work that we don't even know about.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jason. It was such a fun conversation.
Thanks, Stacey.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.